Well, welcome everybody to the latest episode of the HR Tech Chat video podcast. And I'm really looking forward to today's episode. With me today, I have Doug Dennerline, who is CEO of Betterworks, and also Jamie Aitken, who is VP of HR Transformation, also at Betterworks. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks for
great to
having
be
us.
here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you are both repeat guests on the podcast, which is this is a rarefied space. I'm sitting actually, but I'm in rarefied space right now. We have a really interesting topic today. You both have come out with co-authored a book about performance management and the sad state of sort of legacy performance management and all that. And before we get into that, though, if you could both sort of just reintroduce yourselves to our viewers. Some of them haven't seen you before, and let's start maybe with you, Doug.
Yeah, Doug Dennerline, the CEO here at Betterworks. I've been here about 5+ years now working on this product. I'm attracted to this space. I'm actually the ex-president of SuccessFactors. And so I was there when we got acquired by SAP. And, I left shortly after the acquisition, not wanting to be part of a large company, and went to another startup. But I've been attracted to this space for a long time for a couple of reasons. One is I'm an ex-exec at Cisco Systems, and I had a team of 6,000 there. And I had general business partners supporting me, and we did all those typical HR practices that everybody knows and loves and hates for the most part. And now building software that trying to change those, processes that people don't get much from into something that they see value in has been fun for me.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing, and that's quite the resume. And you've been around the block, which is you've seen some of the big things that happen in this space. That's really exciting. Jamie, how about you? Just sort of introduce yourself to our audience again.
Absolutely. So Jamie Aitken, and I lead up the HR transformation practice here at Betterworks. I've been in the HR game for over 25 years, led large global HR transformations and business transformations over the course of my career. Spent the last 10 years or so in the HR tech space, and actually that's where I met Doug as a customer of SuccessFactors, and joyously went over to work with him. And my primary focus at Betterworks is to work with our HR clients to think through talent strategy, change management strategies, with an eye to having sustainable transformation over time, which I think is, everybody talks about transformation, but it doesn't stop when you buy the software and implement it. You have to think the long view of, what changes you need to make over time with your organization to sustain that transformation effort.
Yeah,
Thrilled
yeah,
to be here.
yeah. It's really important. You bring up a great point. Those HR transformation is a longitudinal game, to use a pretentious analyst word. But anyway, again, welcome to you both. And you've both come out with a book, and I want to talk about it for a little bit. It's called Make Work Better. And I wish I'd remembered to bring, I have a copy of it on the other side of the room. It'd be poor form for me to walk over there right now because we're on the podcast. Oh, there we go. All right. and we'll have a link to the book, a landing page for it, and all that when this podcast goes live for the viewers. But Jamie, maybe we'll start with you. What inspired you to collaborate with Doug on this book?
Well, I think first of all, as an HR practitioner, I have been, the policeman for many, many years of enforcing what was a very, traditional performance management. It's a very backward looking, very antiquated, 100-year-old process that frankly wasn't delivering a lot of, impact for the business from a performance perspective, but also for employees and managers. The experience was morale crushing. So, the catalyst was, how could we do this better? And really at the crux of it is also, how do we get HR and the business leaders to be partnering together to take what is an earnest effort by HR to move performance and make performance happen, but in a way that moves the needle for the business. So, you know, we collaborated because we share a clear vision, but also different perspectives. Doug, much more from a business leadership perspective, and then me from an HR perspective. And when you join those two forces together, you really get an end result that both drives engagement for employees and managers, but also moves the needle from the business perspective.
You know, and
Yeah,
for me, Brent, it was
totally.
more about, you know, now having led two companies in the HR space, especially now at Betterworks, and I see customers that are HR people that are brave enough to do something profound, which is take a risk and really change an old process to something new. And working with a CEO understands how important people are to their business when they pair up together and see the impact of that.
Yeah.
Yet 75 or 80% of large companies in the world have not done this change. And this book is about poking at them, saying, why are you doing something that is literally created 100 years ago by the US Army, made popular by Jack Welch at GE, when massive research shows that it doesn't change performance. People hate getting it. It's filled with bias. People hate getting it. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing, yet people still do it. So this book was aimed at helping people understand the value of making the change and giving them a bit of a roadmap on what happens when you do that and what's the profound impact it has on companies that are brave enough to make the change.
Yeah, I can. You both bring up great points. Just a parlay of something you just said, Doug, around, it being, and Jamie, I recall our discussing this in the past in a previous episode. Yeah, this was developed by the U.S. military. And the workplace is not the military. Let's get that out of the way. Okay. I mean, the military does, they do a great job at what they do. But it's really interesting. We've all heard the term, the beatings will continue until morale improves. It's a joke. But this really is the embodiment of that. I imagine that there are a lot of, see, this is such an important message because there are a lot of organizations probably don't realize that annual reviews don't really have no bearing, like they really don't affect performance at all. And what organization really doesn't want performance to improve? I mean, the purpose is not just to experience bad performance so they can just punish it. I mean, that's not the purpose of being an organization. You want the performance to improve.
Yeah.
And that's what really sticks out to me. It's sort of but we've been stuck in this rut of thinking for a long time, where it happens in a lot of areas where you just kind of get into a certain mode of thinking and you just keep doing the same thing because that's the way it's always been done, and expecting it to work because at some point way back in the beginning people thought that it would.
Well, and Brent, if you think about it, the way that traditionally it's measured in terms of a success as a process is percentage of completion, right? As opposed to impact of, what is it that you're trying to achieve? Well, it's not just 100% check the box. Yes, everybody's completed their performance review. And that traditionally is the way HR has measured if they were successful. And I think the pandemic in particular has accelerated that we need to have a completely different way of showing up for our employees. And therefore, we need to be thinking about different ways to get them engaged and focused than we did before. So if anything, it became even more of a catalyst than before, because we've been talking about making this change for a while in HR, but not a lot of bold have stood up to do it.
If you made an interesting point, Brent, because having been an executive at multiple companies, guess who doesn't bother with this process is the top leaders in the organization. Really don't put their direct reports through this, and so they don't really experience how horrible of an experience they're having their people go through, and first line managers going through this process, and how terrible it is for both the manager and the employee, because they're not doing it with their own direct reports.
That's a really good point. That's, because those are close relationships. And it's a great segue into something I want to talk about in a minute, but I want to go back. So first of all, Jamie, you mentioned, that sort of the key, I maybe call it a KPI for HR, is how many completions, right? I mean, talk about the ultimate sort of poster boy for calling yourself a cost center almost, right? It's HR, right? I mean, this is almost the epitome of that. I'm thinking about just an unrelated conversation I had recently with a company that does AI for AI-based stuff for like skills matching and that kind of thing. And when it comes to talent acquisition, uh, recruiting departments, they often sort of measure success on a higher volume of potential new hires, candidates coming into the system, right? But when you're applying AI to a better skills match, to achieve better skills matching, you may have fewer candidates coming into the system, but they're higher value. So it's just
Yeah.
another example of this, a really as a profession in so many ways, so many areas of HCM, we need to truly rethink how we're measuring success.
No question. And I think we candidly also have to build some business acumen or more business acumen around that. I worked with one colleague years ago in HR, and in every single HR meeting that we had, she would look at some point and say, and how is this helping the business? And it would always stop everybody in their tracks because we were deeply involved in the HR life cycle. So we were all just about running the machine and the processes. And her challenge to us was apt, which was, but why are we doing this if it's not actually to serve how we move forward for the business, right?
Mhm.
And I think, you can get in that mindset in HR very, very quickly. But building out that business acumen and understanding and having a much closer finger on the pulse of what the business needs as opposed to just running a cycle makes a huge difference in terms of being able to like throw out the old metrics, really examine the processes that you have in place and challenge yourself of, do we really need to be doing this? And if we do, how can we do it better so that we're aligned not only with the business needs, but also with the employee needs in terms of, career growth, development, et cetera.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is going to be forcing their hand in today's world because, smart employees are going to want to understand how they're going to get developed. And I think a really good interview question these days is, how are you going to develop me? And if it's, we have this annual review process, run. I mean, millennials don't want to be talked to once a year. They want to be talked to every day about how they're performing. And so the processes of the past do not meet the needs of the workforce today.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. There's a real retention risk by not making this change, by not moving forward, getting
100%.
in. Yeah, moving into the future of performance management. And Jamie, you mentioned sort of the bidirectionality there. It's that it's the mutuality of the beneficiality, the mutuality of beneficiality, right? Where it's good for organizational leadership strategy for the business, and it's good for the employees. It's kind of interesting that a lot of things that end up with organizational success are good for all stakeholders within the organization. Yeah. Now going back to Doug, what you said though around like at the top levels of an organization, excuse me, their direct reports, let's say the VPs and the senior VPs, these types of people don't have to go through this kind of annual performance review, and and because there's so much more interaction almost on a daily basis between these people at sort of the top of the organization of the totem pole. And you have to wonder, leaving aside sort of the chicken and the egg question, is that because they performed to get to that level, or is part of it just because that's how it works better to work, right? But thinking about this really kind of gets at the sort of the one of the main tenets of modern performance management, you want to call it enablement or whatever, is more interaction, more frequency of communication between direct reports and their managers. Do you want to maybe dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's what it's all about. It's this notion of, what we're trying to do is build an engaging application that begins with a conversation between a manager and individual contributor. And it's around, what are your goals going to be for the next 90 days, both for helping the company achieve what it wants to achieve, but what do you want to achieve as an employee in this organization? And it's being able to look up at the top company goals, and when good leadership needs to set those on an ongoing basis, because you no longer can do this annual goal setting thing, because the world moves much quicker than that. So maybe you need to pivot in the middle of a 90-day period of time, to pivot, to be competitive, to do something different. So it begins with that conversation, and then it's, hey, let's check in on a regular basis on how are you doing against those goals? Are you achieving them? Are you hitting roadblocks? How can I help you achieve those goals? Let's build a couple of developmental goals for you so you can become who you want to be in this organization. And I'm invested in your success as your leader in getting you there. It's much more engaging. I mean, we see people that use our products and products like ours and other companies, tremendous increases in engagement scores and confidence in leadership and understanding strategy. It's an incredible dynamic, Brent, that we just wish the world knew that if you went ahead and went through this change, which, by the way, takes multiple quarters to get people to understand the value of it. It's not taking the annual thing and doing it 4 times. It's much lighter weight than that, much less time consuming. And with AI, we'll be able to do most of the work for you and write it without bias and give you competent feedback on how you're performing based on the data inside of our application in a much more meaningful way than we would have in the past. So a lot less work, candidly, for managers too.
I want to get into the AI piece of it a little bit. I love AI. All conversations in HCM seem to lead back to AI these days, but it's tough to talk about it without. And I don't think it's definitely not just hyperbole. But one of the things that I just want to go back to what what you were sharing made me think something. It's like the old approach to performance management is predicated on what I think is we can all agree is a false postulate that every single supervisor and manager is a good manager, a good supervisor, or knows, let's put it differently, knows how to manage well and supervise well. It's predicated on that postulate, and that, I believe, is a false postulate. And so what I like, yeah, yeah, we've all had great managers, and we've all had poor managers, so it runs a gamut. This is not sort of an implication of all managers or anything. We're not going to rag on managers here, but the whole point is that I love the new process because it's not just about the direct report improving their performance. It's about the manager getting better too.
Yeah,
very much so.
And we're spending a lot of time focused on building up that competency for managers. So in the product itself, we're giving guides, we're giving just-in-time training and nudges, etc., to help the manager become better, because we recognize that in the past, and I was guilty of it, in the past, HR would sit in a room, we'd design a beautiful process, and we'd huck it over the fence to managers and assume that magically they were going to transform, and that's just not the case. So I think part of the burden needs to also rest on the shoulders of HR, because we didn't take the time or make the effort or recognize the importance that managers needed some support and enablement themselves to be better. So we're doing a lot of that work at Betterworks. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Not all managers are born to be, born immediately to be. Frankly, there's an awful lot of new, inexperienced managers that are out there right now. And so we know that there is a gap. So we're working very hard to fill that gap as well.
Yeah, and that gets into we're often a little bit of a tangent here, but it's interesting because have read that there is research. I haven't read the actual research. Full disclosure, I haven't read the actual research, but I've read that there is research showing that leadership is a learnable skill. There's sort of this myth of the born leader. There are probably some people with some innate sort of traits that make it easier for them, or more, it's more of an intuitive thing for them to become leaders. But maybe they become leaders on their own. But it is definitely a teachable thing. Which is interesting. And that's what I love about this new process as well. What's your favorite part of the book, Doug?
My favorite part is again, this notion that, and I've seen this in so many companies, Brent, where the CEO is like, oh, that HR stuff, oof, sometimes they tuck the HR person literally under the CFO to get far enough away from it. And I tell my sales team, don't even call on that account, because that HR person is going to have no ability to affect the culture. But when you find a CEO that knows probably the most important relationship on their direct reports, your CFO, your COO, your head of HR, your head of your functional leaders, is your HR leader. When you have a good one, and they're invested in the business, not HR all the time. They understand where you're trying to go in 5 years, and they can hold a mirror up to the CEO and say, you know what, these two people on your team don't have the skills to get you where you need to go in 5 years. You need to make a change, and force them to think about that. Like, hey, maybe I really need to make that change, and I'm being blind from a personal relationship that I've developed with that person. And you see the profound impact that has when you have a partner like that on your team, and the difference it can make. And they're I call them mobilizers. They're like, you know what? I'm changing everything we do here. I'm going to change how we do performance reviews. I don't even like performance reviews. By the way, most managers aren't capable of, we're not psychologists. We don't know what motivates people to perform. And I think, to your point, leadership has also changed. The qualities of a leader of 25 years ago wouldn't work in today's environment. Today's about empathy. It's about understanding the work environment. What's happening at home? How are you integrating work with your life, not life with your work? And good leaders like that are need to be trained, and we can help do that through the product ourselves, and take that burden off of HR a bit. And so the book points out all those things in multiple chapters on the power of when a good good CEO and a good HR leader together have a profound impact on a company.
That's such a great point. I've read research going back many years where, one of the top sort of perennial concerns or strategic imperatives, I'd say, of CEOs is finding and retaining the best talent. They don't want to lose their good people. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Jamie, how about you? Another really interesting part of the book that you like?
I would say, it's sort of a riff off of Doug, but from an HR perspective, because we really do, I hope, encourage courage. Because it can be daunting if you're facing, as an HR leader, if you're facing, in your gut that transformation needs to happen. And by the way, also that it's happening in companies other than yours. It's to encourage that they become courageous enough to step up and say, we need to do this here. This is time to do this here. And we give some really good, very, bullet point. Here's the sort of steps that you need to take in order to do this. Here's what that transformation is going to entail. And number one is also finding a really strong CEO as a partner. But I love the fact that this is a little bit of a challenge to both CEOs and HR, but there's also an empathetic side to it, which is be courageous, be bold. This is the time. The marketplace is asking for it. In your gut, you need to do it. So let's go.
And Brent, there's also, I think, 7 or so stories of examples of companies, real companies like Intuit and others, that have made these transformations, and they discuss the impact that it had on their businesses when they did it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And those those all important metrics that are very, very helpful and impactful, and convincing other organizations to do the same thing. Absolutely. And I love what you have to say too about courage, Jamie. Oftentimes you have an HR organization at an employer that's sort of inundated or overwhelmed with operational HR, what we like to call concrete HR, so that cost center stuff, and it takes courage to kind of raise your hand and say, hey, we can be better. Let's do this, and to have help to help them have that epiphany so they can fathom that life can be different, and they can start that journey along the HCM maturity to full HCM maturity, which is so exciting. I want to talk about AI just for a minute here, because I think it's really, really exciting, with performance management and all this stuff around generative AI. And let me just sort of set the stage with what I'm thinking, is that, and I've heard this from other people. Certainly, this is not, my sort of unique statement or whatever, but I've heard it from others, and I've thought it myself too. Is that it's kind of interesting. You insert AI in the right way into the workplace, into HCM. We'll say HCM, right? And it can actually make the work experience feel more human when you take out some human elements to it and replace kind of, or enhance it with AI. That's what I'm thinking might be happening here. I heard you talk about eliminating biases and this sort of stuff, Doug. I'd love to hear you thinking around that.
Yeah, it's going to be as profound as the invention of the World Wide Web, and probably even more, because it is getting so smart so fast. We are deeply involved in thinking about the impact it has on all of our processes. It can, if you think about, probably one of the big deterrents of a manager in this process is, on average, they spend 5 weeks writing, getting right up to the end of this thing, writing performance reviews. And it's filled with recency bias. Well, what's the last thing I did with this person? With AI, you can have it look at all the data in the application over the course of time. You can give it a period of time you want it to look back in this person's body of work and write a review that is empathetic, that's written in a certain voice, that would remove any language that could be conceived to be biased. And then it can be reviewed by a manager to say, yes, this represents accurately what this person's achievements were in the last quarter. You can have it do things like look at a person's body of work and put that person in a 9-block calibration process in a large organization in the right block, versus have it be somebody's ability to debate where their people belong based upon their effort. The list of things that we're doing are endless. The ability to give an administrator of the HR software an AI roadmap of how to build a program, and not have to reach out to us as a vendor to help them understand how to do that. They can literally have AI build the program for them. And so the list of things that this can do to make what HR does seen as an incredible value in an organization actually move the needle on enablement of people is going to be profound. And it's probably one of the, we're using it even to help us write the code, Brent. I mean, we use Copilot today. And so we've gotten the question, well, aren't a bunch of people going to lose their job? And the way I answer that is, well, I could have 10 less people, or I could do 10 times more work if I keep the people that I have.
Yeah.
Right. And the people that do the reduction are going to fall behind, because smart CEOs are going to keep the number of people they have, but operate at a much higher frequency of output.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And I'm just going to let what you said stand. I mean, this is, I was going to try to put a fine point on it, but I mean, that's just great. So fascinating. Just we really live in a very, very exciting times when it comes to HCM and the management of the employment of people, or the inspiration of the employment of people. You know, the leading of the employment of people, and performance management. It's, you know, if anything else, it really, the rubber is really meeting the road. If anywhere else in HCM, then it's definitely performance management.
You know, I'd make one more point that I think is important, because you touched on. I do think that enterprises around the world neglect first line management in probably the most serious way. They just don't put the investment in somebody that, you know, made somebody a new manager. I mean, when I was at Cisco and I would promote somebody, I'd call them back in 90 days and say, what are you doing differently today than you did 90 days ago? And they go, nothing. I said, well, then you're just being an individual contributor, not being a manager. You know, I mean, there's an art to managing. Well, with AI, we can also look at, when's the last time you reached out to this person? When did you have an interaction with them? We can send them a nudge saying, hey, you know what, you have a one-on-one coming up and you haven't had a conversation around these 3 topics that you should bring up in your next one-on-one. We can lead the horse to water here in a very serious way, and helping, you know, build pedagogy into the process of education of managers in it using AI.
Oh, that's and you know, it's also about, it's helping. That's helping HR be that that advisor, that mentor when it comes to the
100%.
employee experience too. Yeah, this is
I mean, think about
yeah.
it. Think about it. As opposed to HR, and I've seen this in a few different organizations, more than I would wish for, where HR at the end of a performance review process, their job is to run around and hound managers to complete their, you know, check off the box, right? Make sure that the process is complete. What a switch we can have with, you know, as opposed to that bureaucratic, administrative, heavy activity. HR now is, you know, unencumbered by that, and can be therefore given the time, space, and
They'll be seen as heroes for the first time. Absolutely
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, heroes. All HR departments, they have a burning desire to be seen as the heroes, and if we can give them the tools to help them do it, then they're off to the races.
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh wow, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the time. We're out of time, but it's always great speaking with you both. Always great conversation. This is really looking forward to this podcast being live, and thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for the time, and thanks for the interest. Appreciate it very much.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.